You have questions? We have answers. Welcome to the Therapist Question Box with your host, Miss Lindsay Schiss.
Welcome back to another episode of the Therapist Question Box, where we are not afraid of anything, so ask away. Today I have with me Kathy Kinghorn, who's a partner at Therapy Utah and a mentor and friend of mine and an awesome therapist. So Kathy, thanks for joining us today.
Good to be here. Good to be here.
So today we're talking about freeze, right? If we think of those different responses, flight, fight, or freeze, we're going to be talking about freeze. We have a listener question who brought up the freeze response, and she wants some answers about that. So I'll just launch right into the question, and then Kathy will get started. So here's the question. How do I cultivate a sense of safety and presence in my body if I'm trapped in the freeze response as a result of CPTSD, which is complex PTSD? And what are some of the coping skills, and how do I develop them so I can stay present in my life and gain some sense of agency? So let's just break down this question. First of all, Kathy, can you tell us the difference? People, I think, are familiar with PTSD. That's thrown around a lot. What is the difference between PTSD and complex PTSD?
Well, first, what a great question, because so many are afflicted by this particular diagnosis. Complex PTSD is trauma over time. So that could be childhood trauma where you lived in a violent neighborhood, where going to school was extremely stressful. It could be childhood sexual abuse. It could be being an adult and all of a sudden find yourself being a refugee. It's trauma over time versus PTSD can be a car accident. It can be things that are one-off events that trigger a really strong response in you. So the complexity of it is that because it's happened over time, it has a far-reaching impact on our system.
Got it. Okay, that's a helpful way to distinguish PTSD from CPTSD. So it's complex because it's not just one event, but it's events over time, right? Does it need to be the same event, or can it be differing events?
It can certainly be different events. So you may find yourself living in one lifestyle, and then a lot of events happen. We all know right now that finances for families are challenging at times. And so you might find yourself all of a sudden trying to find an RV for your family to live in. And that's traumatic. Just that change in environment is traumatic. And then it could be going to a new school and maybe not having any skills to meet friends, or the demographic is such that you've all of a sudden become a minority, or you're just confused by what circumstances are going on because you're not getting enough information. So it can certainly be a combination of traumatic events, or it could be the same traumatic event over time. The same individual in your life that has access to you sexually abuses you from the time you're 4 till the time you're 11.
Okay. That's really helpful to understand that distinction. So this listener, it sounds like she has had some issues with her responses to PTSD, CPTSD, right? And in particularly, it's the freeze response. So can you tell us, just explain the freeze response first?
Okay, so the freeze response is the reaction where your body shuts down, and it can literally shut down to the point where it does not remember how to breathe. It doesn't remember how to make the flow of your blood go correctly. So when you're a first responder, you're always checking for shock, so that if somebody's got a bleed out in their leg, certainly you're attuning to that, but you're also watching, because the leg might not be a life-threatening situation. But if they go into shock, if their body freezes, it means I'm going to shut things down. And so that freeze response is a very exhausting response to be in. It's a very precarious response to be in.
Mm. Gosh, that like my heart goes out to that listener, because when you're saying that, like, it is that paralyzed, disconnected, trapped feeling. I mean, that's what I'm hearing as you're explaining this, and really just an immobilization, right? And again, why does the body do that?
So before I answer that last question, I want to
Yeah,
touch on what you said, Lindsay.
go
I
ahead.
want our listeners to understand that many people are coming from a place of CPTSD. And those symptoms aren't just, freeze is just one of the many symptoms. Individuals with CPTSD have a lot of trouble sleeping. They have a lot of trouble taking the thoughts that they know in a moment might not be accurate, and unpacking those and get an accurate read on a situation. They may be overcome with anxiety in a space that wasn't anxiety
Mm,
raising before. They
mm,
have a wide range usually in their emotions. So a person stuck in freeze might all of a sudden have a really strong anger reaction because they moved into the fight and then they came back to the freeze. So I call that frenzy. You go amp
mm,
up and you shut down. But what I
mm,
want to suggest to listeners who aren't experiencing this themselves, you are in contact with individuals. They're your volunteer buddy. They're your neighbor. They're your colleague at work. And you may be walking them through some directions, and you're both are on the same page, and then you walk away and you can see that they're a bit flustered and they're saying, I'm so sorry, I knew I should have understood everything, but I forgot the sequence of events that we're supposed to do. Have kindness, have compassion. They're one step away from freezing and maybe not showing up again because they are shamed unnecessarily by their triggers.
mm,
But the triggers are shaming often. I have never treated somebody with CPTSD that didn't come in with a felt sense of shame, like I
mm,
am responsible for this, and why am I not dealing with it better? So just an awareness that if somebody is not sleeping, we all know that we're not thinking straight. So just on that one symptom of sleep disruptions, they're going
yeah.
to have trouble focusing. They're going to have trouble reaching out. They're going to have trouble discerning whether or not you're a safe person for them.
Mm. And yet, if it's my volunteer buddy, if it's, somebody that I'm interacting with, I likely may not know what's gone on in this person's past, right? I may not know that there's been complex trauma that's causing them to respond in this way. And so it makes me just think, like, less judgment, more compassion. Like, we may not know and we may
Yeah.
not understand why they're showing up in that way, but we also don't know their story and the entirety of their story. So again, honoring that we all have a story, and our body's ability to try to adapt to an overwhelmed nervous system is our body trying to help us, right? But to the everybody else, it might seem frustrating or inappropriate, or that response seemed very off considering what was said, right? But what's going on inside is often far more than what the naked eye can see.
Yeah, and let me maybe help the person struggling with this, the person that asked the question. I want to help possibly remove some or hopefully all of the shame around it by giving you a little bit of background. Why are those triggers so intense? Why does your worldview not seem to quite fit what's going on? So when those traumatic events happened, well, let me just back up. We have two parts of our memory. We have a part that's called declarative memory. So if Lindsay said, "Hey, Kathy, what are you doing? What did you do last weekend?" I would say, "Well, I went to a booth for Therapy Utah. I went out to eat. It was a great weekend." I can declare, I can share with Lindsay what I did. So that's declarative memory. Non-declarative memory is our unconscious. So our unconscious is, I walk by a meat counter and I'm drawn to talking to the older guy. This truly happened to me a few days ago. There's an older gentleman behind the meat counter. He came around to talk to me. It was very sweet. It was very tender. I walked away realizing, man, I miss my dad. 35 years as a meat cutter. A meat department is a lovely place for me. So that was my non-declarative memory. I was feeling connected to this stranger, this gentleman who was so kind, for an unconscious reason until I attached it to what I know about, my relationship with my dad. So when a traumatic event happens, the part of your brain that holds your emotion, holds that fear response, it's called the amygdala, that amps up like a Christmas tree. Full on emotional reaction to what's happening. So if somebody was sexually assaulted and their response was freeze, they would be immobilized, completely immobilized. That reaction would be so big, the fear would be so strong that it took the ability away to move. Now, at the same time, we have this other declarative memory that I mentioned. That, again, a declarative memory is about when, where, and who. That part of your brain, researchers have found, completely shuts down in a traumatic event. Now, why is that important? What does that matter? That part of your brain that's the declarative, the hippocampus, shuts down. Why it's important is because when those triggers come up, that part of your brain that's shut down, it's shutting down when the trigger comes up. So it doesn't know that it's not happening right now in the spot with you. And the part of your brain that was extremely activated in the moment, that lights up like it did in the moment. So what I'm saying is that your brain believes it's happening to you right now because it has no other evidence.
Isn't that amazing? As you're saying that, I think that is, boy, that is a good reason for self-compassion and compassion with others. I mean, that alone, if nothing else, that our brain truly doesn't know if this is a historical event or if this is happening in the moment. And so that response, although it may seem way blown out of proportion for the situation that's happening, it's actually our brilliant brains trying to protect us. That's all it's trying to do.
And if it's like the example of a vet when a car backfires and he jumps on the ground to hide. I can't imagine a person that would mock him. I really can't, because it's evident that that sound that sounded like an explosion triggered him to drop on the floor and hide because there was danger. So it's really critical to understand that your brain has decided, it has made a decision that the world is dangerous. If you have CPTSD, then your worldview is there is danger everywhere. That new relationship, likely dangerous. The one I'm in, likely dangerous. That opportunity for a promotion, likely dangerous. So again, if you're with somebody that has this life experience of repetitive trauma, don't be offended if they don't connect quickly, or they seem maybe a little bit reticent to share their story. Their brain is telling them, look, you've got to play it safe. The world is dangerous. And so if you think about it from that lens, CPTSD is really a memory disorder. It really is a memory disorder. My memory is disordered, thinking that things from my past are happening right now. And that is a significant disorder.
Yeah, absolutely. It makes so much sense when you lay it out that way, right? When I can think of it from a trauma perspective, then it makes so much sense. And instead of saying, oh, I'm so broken or this person is broken, it's actually so adaptive. The brain is adapting to it's just too much, right? So what are some initial steps someone can take to start feeling more safe in their body? So when they're in that freeze response, as this listener said, what are some steps that they could take?
So first, you're going to want to take small steps. If you've been struggling with this and you know that that's your diagnosis, you've probably been told that really noticing your breathing is helpful. I agree with that. Absolutely. But that can feel overwhelming. It's like I can't take deep breath. I don't, thinking that I have to take deep breaths raises my anxiety. So when you consider noticing your breathing, truly just notice it. Don't worry if your breaths are deep or not. Just know, oh, I breathe mostly through my nose. Oh, I breathe and I exhale for a little longer. Just notice it. So as you get some insights into what will help, make sure you package them in a level that works for where you are right now. The other thing, Lindsay, is really to help your brain rewire its memories. Let me say this. In the medical world, they have an expression. They say pain lies. Doctors, nurses will tell you. Somebody comes in and their shoulders hurt and come to find out they're having a heart attack. Somebody comes in and says, my leg is just aching, but it's actually stems from a problem in their lower back. So when a patient describes their pain, the doctor is really paying attention to their descriptions, to their symptoms, and also being aware that the source of the pain is generally lying. So we have to figure out what's really, really causing the pain. So if we just go and try to solve for the symptoms, and there's a lot of good work that can be done, such as noticing your breathing. But really what we want to capture, what's the source of the pain? So I'll give you an example. My friend just told me a couple days ago, she went to the doctor, a physical therapist. For years, she's had trouble with her thumb and her elbow, just pain. Just it flares up and she's in pain. And she's tried everything. She said, I've gone to every doctor. They don't know. They can't fix it. The pain comes back. She went to this physical therapist, and immediately the physical therapist said, have you ever been in a car wreck? Oh, yeah. 12 years ago, I was in a car wreck. Was it significant? Did you have whiplash? Oh, yeah. My whiplash was severe. And what had happened is the physical therapist had been examining her neck. And she says that whiplash is so tight. It has caused such tightness. It's choking off your thyroid. And and the position of that caused by the whiplash is actually what's causing the pain in your thumb and in your elbow. So I'm going to work the source of pain, but I'm going to tell you, your thumb and elbow, they're going to hurt. They're going to hurt more for a bit. Until we get the source gone, this is going to hurt more. Trust me on this, please. Let me do what I need to do on the source of the pain, and it's going to get better. And so that's one of the reasons that we are a trauma-informed clinic, because we don't just go after what the person is saying. Here's my pain, fix this. We take a step back and we say, let's see if we can figure out what's the real source of the pain, because we can clean up the symptoms. We can do a lot of work on managing. But ultimately, if we don't get back to where it's coming from, so somebody with CPTSD, truly, the source of the pain is your system saying the entire world is dangerous. If danger is everywhere, then I can minimize my trauma responses. I can really work to minimize them, but I'll never be free of the thought that the world is dangerous. And so a symptom will come up.
That makes a lot of sense. And, as you're saying that, I think you had to have somebody that knew what they were doing, that they weren't just looking at the thumb and saying the thumb is the problem, but they were saying there's something else going on. And let's look back in the history and see where this problem lies. It's not just the thumb, right? I think that same thing is there's behaviors that are manifesting themselves, right? And it might be, it might be depression, anxiety, whatever. But really, there's something else. That's a symptom of the problem. There's something else going on that's informing those type of feelings, right? And it's the same principle, which is exactly what you said. Why we are a trauma-informed clinic is one of the reasons why it's so valuable is we don't just look at the behaviors and say, okay, here's some behavioral modification. We're going to do X, Y, and Z. But we say, these are the behaviors that need to be addressed. But then let's get to the root cause. Let's see what really happened and really try to do some work around that, because behavioral activation matters. But also we've got to get clear about what the root cause is here, right? So when you say that, what's the source of the pain? What are some treatments that you would recommend as different therapeutic interventions that might help get back to some of those root cause problems?
Lindsay, I think we need to commit to doing an entire podcast on IFS, internal family systems, because that particular modality, for me, I love it. I use it quite frequently. It's such a beautiful modality to get to the root. And then I think we should have some of our other therapists that use ART, EMDR, trauma-informed CBT. We need to have them on and walk through those. All of those benefit somebody that's really looking at finding out and discovering that they have CPTSD. So I'd say let's take those and do another podcast. But some immediate things.
We could do an episode on every single one of those, right? As you're talking. I personally do EMDR, I do ART, which again, people are like, what is that, right? And we will do episodes on all of those things because they are important to understand. And I will just say from a personal perspective, I had done therapy myself. And until I did some of this trauma work in EMDR, I did not realize there was some residual things that I needed to work through. And doing some of this somatic work, meaning body work that happened in EMDR, I was blown away at some of the actual relief that I had felt that frankly, I had not found in talk therapy for a lot of years. And so I'm with you. I think doing a podcast episode on a lot of those interventions that you mentioned, those are actually my 3 favorite ones personally that I use in my practice, are really wildly beneficial and also evidence-based as gold standard for trauma treatment. So yes, we will do that. But anything that comes to your mind that might be beneficial aside from those.
Yeah. Speaking to this listener in particular, and honestly, just asking the question is I don't know how much courage it took. I don't know how much faith that you had to have that there might be an answer today. I just want to tell you that you're worth it. And I really am grateful for the question. So here's just a few things that you might be able to consider implementing even today. 3 C's. 1, remember, we're talking about a brain that says the whole world's dangerous. And I hope that our listener has had opportunities to see that this part of the world is not, this friendship is not, this hobby is not, this space that I can retreat to is not. I hope there's evidence in your life that there is safety. So I'm just going to say the first C is a chat with yourself, answering the question, what is real right now? And the reason I suggest that question is since our brain is making this statement, and it's powerfully making this statement, it does not accept that it's wrong at any level yet. So it is solid. I mean, if it was a betting brain, it would bet on red with 100% confidence, So it is absolutely married to the idea that this world is not safe. So just start a chat with yourself. What is real right now? Well, I'm in my car and I'm driving and it feels safe to listen to the podcast right now. I hope it's introducing some safety. Maybe when you take a shower, it feels safe to feel the warmth of the water. Maybe there's a walk that you have, a trail. Maybe when you're being a parenting volunteer and you're in class and you're with a bunch of 3-year-olds and it feels safe to have that interaction. Whatever it is, ask yourself frequently through the day, just chat with yourself. What is real right now? Where's my safe place? These kind of questions allow your brain to consider, wait a minute. Wait a minute. Actually, what is real right now is that my husband and I had a great conversation. We sat down and we had a great conversation. That's real. That's real. So it's great to write those things down. You're starting to create a list of moments, and they will likely just be moments when you feel a felt sense of safety.
And it's what that
So
is doing is getting them back into the present moment. Like, this is real. This is present. Come back to the here and now.
yeah. And you're making it, remember, if it's true that this is a memory disorder, now you're forming new memories.
New memories. Yep.
As you form those, and if you repeat this question, when you first start feeling that anxiety and you interject, what is real right now, you're disrupting the memory that's coming with that old emotion. So, and that fear that starts to rise and begins with anxiety, if you can ask yourself that question, then it's going to disrupt the memory and it's going to bring new information so that your systems can say, I started to get anxious and then I remembered what was true right now is I can leave this meeting if it's uncomfortable. That's true for me. I can walk down the street and take a breather during my lunch break. That's real right now. So we're trying to disrupt the memory.
Nice. I love that. Disrupt the memory with new memories that are real right now, right? I think of grounding techniques. Okay, what can I feel? What can I touch? What can I taste? What can I see? Again, what is it? It's orienting our brain to the current moment, right? Not in the past, but right here and now. Good. What would the other 2 C's be that you mentioned?
So the second one I would say is get curious about anything. Because we're talking about a brain that goes, look, I don't need to be curious. It's not safe. But get curious about anything. Look at how somebody look at a newspaper article. And whether you agree with it or not, just get curious about the individual that wrote it. I wonder what their viewpoint is on this particular article. Is it in the article? I wonder if it accurately represents my community. And it's not to get to any conclusion. It's just to start your brain believing that it can waste the energy on curiosity. Our brains are very energy sensitive, and curiosity truly takes more energy. So as you just try to get curious, your energy will, your brain will resist that. So you could read a poem and go, this is for me, I don't get much poetry, Lindsay. My brain is so linear that I look at poetry and I go, well, that went over my head completely.
It's okay. It's not your thing. It's okay.
Yeah. If I can get curious about it and go, I'm going to unpack this statement. So just find something that you can pick up, and it literally doesn't matter. We're just introducing curiosity to your brain. And honestly, confusion. Once we get into confusion, if we have CPTSD, we will resist that at all costs. We will look for a solid answer now, immediately. I need to know now. Individuals that carry CPTSD, they have a very unhealthy relationship with time. This needs to happen now. I need to stop doing this now. I need to be told what to do now. So that relationship with time is way too intense.
Why is that, Kathy?
It's because when you're in fear, you only have seconds to react. So if you ask me a question and I have a fear of looking stupid and I have a history of PTSD, I'm going to have to get really defensive with you now. You need to stop asking that question. So it's just a protective, fear-based response to get out of the situation.
That makes sense.
If we're not as connected to time, now our system can relax. If I never find out the meaning of this poem, I can go through life. I can step away from any timestamp that I need to understand it. So you want to find things that have no, whether you figure it out or not, it absolutely doesn't matter. So when you pay attention to time, you'll notice how inextricably linked you are to time. So you're just looking for moments where you can step back from that intense relationship with time.
Good. Okay. Step back. Boy, that's hard to do. That's hard to do even for people that don't have CPTSD, right? To step back from that relationship with time, because so much of our life is oriented around time, right? So,
Right.
so I'm hearing chatting with self, curiosity, and what would our last one be?
It would be compassion. Gosh, Lindsay, this gets me emotional. Compassion for yourself. You're not having these triggers for attention or to get out of something or to avoid. And you may have been told those messages. You may have been told by so-called professionals those messages. You may have been told that by people that you believe loved you, and maybe they do love you. So I'm not ruling that out. But what I'm saying is have compassion for what your body, your mind, your soul has experienced over time. And if you can have compassion for yourself, then you put yourself back in the equation. You can go, I am truly doing my best. Kathy suggested having a chat with myself. And I did ask myself, what is real right now? And that question was way harder than I thought. So I didn't even take time to answer it. But that's okay, because I'm learning. I'm learning this new thing. And I just did the very best I could. So please, please offer yourself some compassion. And I will say, Lindsay, with this diagnosis, it would be rare that you wouldn't need some therapeutic intervention. It truly, truly.
Yeah.
And you can find that safety. One sadness in my life is when my clients, I'll say, where's your safe place? Where is it in the week? And they'll say, just your office. And so that's so lovely and so painful to hear that they haven't yet found a safe place outside. So your brain will learn when it feels safe. And so we have to move it to consider that safety might exist. And when we move it to consider that, we need to start chatting with ourselves. We need to get curious and just let our brain have some fun. We need to be able to tolerate some confusion and see that it's okay. I'm going to survive the day. And we need compassion. We absolutely need compassion.
Those three C's are so helpful. Chat with self, stay in curiosity, and then self-compassion. They may seem like simple steps, but those are actually profound things to do when a person is in this freeze response, right? As our listener said. So as we conclude, I keep thinking to take small steps. This can seem very overwhelming, right? It can seem something that feels insurmountable, but just that small steps are a step in the right direction, right? And those steps might be just to notice your breathing, to try to get curious about what the source of the pain is, right? And maybe to get curious and really work on the shame around that's happening with that freeze response. I do think there is a lot to be understood. And as you said, there is help available, and really appreciate Kathy, your time and insights. And truly, by focusing on those small steps towards reconnecting with your body and building a sense of safety, healing is possible. It is a gradual process, and we know that. But there are resources and hopefully people in your life, as well as yourself, that you can find to add in that compassion and in those safety as a safety resource. We are grateful for this question and the vulnerability that it took a listener to ask this question. Kathy, we appreciate your time. And remember, to those listeners, if you have a question, go to our show notes or the Therapy Utah website. No question is off limits, and we are here to be a resource for you. Thanks for joining us. Until next time, take care.